Welcome to Stop and Scare. If this is your first time to the channel, please be sure to subscribe now for future content, and be sure to leave a like on the video, as it will help reach that many more people. If you would like your story featured on an upcoming video, or you have theme ideas, leave them in the comments section below. Tonight's video features truly terrifying laundromat horror stories. These stories were submitted from viewers just like yourselves. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the scare. Story number 1. This happened to me about 8 years ago. I lived in a large suburb that was very safe. I was renting a fantastic apartment for very cheap, but the trade-off was no washers or dryers allowed, so I had to sell mine and use the laundromat instead. There were a few around, but they were always busy and crowded, so I would go at 4 or 5 in the morning. On a random weekday when it wasn't busy, I would use a bunch of machines all at once and get finished quickly. It was great. The best laundromat was also the closest and was on a busy road with a bus stop outside, so I always felt safe, even as a 5-foot female. They had a front door that was always unlocked and a back door that could be locked on the inside, which I always locked if there were no other customers. One morning I forgot to lock the back door. I was sitting with my back to it, engrossed and studying for a big exam, with all of my school stuff around me. It was noisy with all the machines running, so I never heard anything. I had this feeling that someone else was in the room. When I turned around, there was this man, no more than 2 feet away from me, sneaking up behind me. He was a creepy guy with rumpled clothes and dirty long hair. He tried to play it off like he'd lost a sweater and had just come back to look around for it, but he was obviously sneaking up on me, since the door hadn't slammed, and it was usually very loud. I told him I hadn't seen it. Then I just casually walked out and bolted to the convenience store across the street. The plan was to wait until someone else went to do laundry and then go back for all of my things. I know it was an awful plan, but it's all I had at the time. I was so freaked out, I called my husband at work, and the creep left while I paced the 7-Eleven nervously. I went back and finished my laundry after locking the back door. Luckily, we were moving in a few weeks and would have our own laundry at home. In the meantime, my husband did all the laundry, so I never had to go back. A few weeks later, he came into the laundromat from the 1711 to finding creeps fitting that description, trying all the car doors in the laundromat parking lot. That was very suspicious. There was just 2 older women there alone as well, while my husband ran across the street for his coffee in between loads. My husband used his imposing size to tell the man to stay away from the laundromat, to stop scaring all the women in the neighborhood. About 6 months later, I see the man's picture on the local news. He was arrested for rape and attempted murder in a nearby neighborhood. This all happened in Union Street Laundromat in Manchester, New Hampshire, before it was renovated and the new owner took it over. The laundromat is so much better now. All new washers and dryers, plus 24/7 surveillance. I got my concealed carry permit the next day and still get a sick feeling in my stomach, remembering that empty gaze, even 8 years later. Story number 2. My ex and I used to live in an old apartment complex. It wasn't outfitted with a washer or a dryer, so we had to go to the laundromat next door. It was late at night, but I needed my work clothes to be clean for the next day, and we had the money then. I was sitting by the window watching cartoon clips on YouTube while my clothes were in the dryer. My ex was outside vaping when this guy came in, who I didn't recognize. He looked dirty, like he might have been homeless. I didn't even get a look at his face. He came to sit by me and asked what I was watching. I thought he was trying to make conversation, so I told him about the show. He didn't seem to be listening though. The man got a bit too close for comfort, trying to peer over my shoulder to watch a clip with me, and I tried to scoot away a bit without being too obvious. Looking back on it, he might have been using it as an excuse to stare down my shirt. That's when my ex walked in. He immediately gets a message when he sees how close this guy is, decides to stay close to me until he leaves. Once the guy sees that I am no longer alone, he leaves in a hurry across the street to hide in a gas station. A lady walks in as we are calling the cops to report his suspicious behavior, and she asks what's going on. We tell her about the guy, and her face morphs into one of fear. She tells us that the guy we saw has a history of harassing women and following them with the intention of getting them to have sex with him. He's had a violent streak with a long history of law enforcement. Keep in mind, my ex and I are both small. I'm a 5'3" string bean who can barely fight off a feral cat, and my ex is about the same height, with just a little more muscle than me. The cops show up and we tell them everything. Since he hadn't done anything against the law, they couldn't do anything other than talk to him and let him know that he was making people uncomfortable. But even then, we saw him pass by across the street a few times. We didn't want to leave the laundromat and risk being followed, so we stayed there for an hour after our clothes were done to make sure he was gone. The lady we met gave me her box cutter keychain. She told me to keep it with me just in case he showed up again. We never saw him again after that, but I often wonder what might have happened if I had been alone that night. To be honest, I'm not sure. Nothing good. Not the scariest thing in the world, but I figured I would share either way. Story number 3. Everyone knows what doing laundry is like. Monotonous work while your brain tries to waste away the minutes it takes for the machine to finish its cycle. Occasionally having stiff conversation in passing with strangers. This night was no different, at first. As I was pulling my laundry out of the dryer, and I began to fold it on a little table, I heard a voice over the lull of my headphones. "Excuse me, are you using this?" The voice came from a man in his late 40s or early 50s. He wore glasses that reminded me of my grandfather. He was wearing a stained, disposable face mask. It hung under his nose and just above his mouth. I could see that start of a dirty blonde mustache poking out. He was gesturing to an empty cart next to the table. I simply said, "No, I'm good. I have one already." And he took it and began loading his laundry and folding on the table adjacent from mine. Now started the usual routine questions that all lonely older men seem to ask. "What's your name?" "Ah, that's beautiful. So, how old are you?" 22? "Do you live around here?" "No, really the town over. You have to lie." Then they'll ask, "Did you go to college?" "What did you study?" "Yes, culinary arts management." "Oh, so you like to cook?" "Yes." I tried to keep the conversation short but light-hearted. As it continued with some short remarks about the wonders of doing laundry, he asked the dreaded questions. "Where do you work? Do you live by yourself?" I hesitated on the questions momentarily, trying to keep my privacy intact without provocation. "Oh, you wouldn't know. It's a small and mom-and-pop restaurant. And no, you have to lie." He stopped folding his laundry as I just started to load mine into my hamper. He walked over to my table and leaned against the washer so that he was in my eyesight. His eyes squinted slightly as he pulled his mask under his chin, uncovering his face. He then awkwardly called out, "So, do you want to go to the movies with me sometime, cutie?" My eyebrows knitted together softly as a wave of different emotions flooded my brain. Confusion as to why he would even ask. I didn't even know his name. Embarrassment, as he's easily my father's age, and I'm not into that. Shock because this man doesn't even know what my face looks like. Anxiety because I have to reject him. I was so thankful for my mask because I'm sure my expression was not one he would have liked to see. I softly shook my head and he copied my actions in tandem. I fumbled out a soft, "No, I'm sorry. I have a boyfriend." I studied his face as I watched his brain process my response. He knitted his eyebrows together and curled his lip. I could see nicotine stains on his teeth. He replied in an eerily soft tone, like how you calm a fussy baby. "Oh, no? You don't want to go to the movies? You have a boyfriend? Okay." He nodded his head in his last word. His eyes widened slightly as they fixated on mine. His voice grew suddenly cold. "It's okay. You don't have to lie to me. It's okay. You don't have to lie to me," insinuating the don'ts with tinges of anger. Annoyance filled me as his accusation. "I'm not lying. We've been together for a year and a half. I love him." His eyes softened as he just now realized the two other people in the laundromat. He slinked away, returning to fold his laundry, long abandoned. I looked at him as I pulled my hamper into my arms and uttered a small, "Have a nice day." I haven't been back to that specific laundromat, and I don't do laundry alone anymore. Story number 4. Mary Ellen Diener went searching for change for the laundromat on November 14th, 1965. It was the last time the 14-year-old was seen alive. Lester Eubanks grabbed Mary Ellen as she walked along the sidewalk. He dragged her behind a house in the 300 block of North Mulberry Street, raped her, shot her twice, and left her for dead. But Mary Ellen didn't die. Not right away. Eubanks, who lived in the neighborhood, reportedly heard noises and returned to the scene. He finished the teen off by smashing her in the head with a brick. She was found with a handful of nickels and dimes right next to her. The case was fairly straightforward. Eubanks was convicted in May 1966 and sentenced to death. In 1972, the Supreme Court declared the death penalty unconstitutional, and his sentence was commuted to life in prison. Eubanks could have faded from public consciousness, but he was back in the news on December 7th, 1973. He escaped while Christmas shopping in Columbus on an honor assignment. Eubanks has been on the run ever since. Authorities say they think he is still alive. The U.S. Marshals recently released an age progression photo of Eubanks, who would be 73. "I really believe we're going to catch up to this guy," Deputy U.S. Marshal David Seiler said. Mansfield was a different city in 1965. The North Side was bustling with activity. Big factories meant a lot of jobs. It was a happy time, Myrtle Carter said earlier this week. Carter is the older sister of Mary Ellen. She was 18 and married when her sister was murdered. Cassie Jones, their mother, sent Mary Ellen and her younger sister Brenda, 12, by cab from their West Dixon Avenue home to the half-hour laundromat on Spring Mill Street when the family's dryer malfunctioned. The reason she was so comfortable sending them out at night is my grandmother, Love Williams, lived next door to the laundromat, Carter said. When Mary Ellen and Brenda needed change, the older girl headed out to another laundromat. Eubanks lay in wait, watching. The city man was out on bond on an attempted rape charge when he grabbed Mary Ellen. Eubanks was accused of attacking an 18-year-old waitress in a North Side restaurant. "He's an absolute monster," Seiler said. "If you saw the size of the guy compared to the size of this little girl, Mary Ellen, she never had a chance." When Mary Ellen didn't return, Brenda went to their grandmother's house. William started looking for the teen. Police had her identify the body. Mary Ellen's mother told the News Journal that the 14-year-old, who was a student at John Simpson Junior High School, wanted to be a nun. Carter didn't remember that detail, but she said her sister was sweet. "She was a quiet person, but fun-loving," Carter said. "She was a typical 14-year-old. Carter said detectives came to their house to let her know her sister was gone. "We were shocked and traumatized, and in total disbelief," she said. Carter said dealing with death was a new experience. "As far as I know, no one in our family had died before," she said. While the family was devastated, Jones and Brenda may have been the most affected. Carter said her mother was never the same. "That started my mom's weakening health," she said. "Mary Ellen was a lot like my mother. I think she felt wronged." Jones died in 2000. Brenda died in 2014. They were so close, Carter said of Mary Ellen and Brenda. Brenda sought counseling throughout her life. "I think she never, ever got over it." Thank you guys for watching and listening to the very end. If you are new to the channel and you haven't yet subscribed, please be sure to subscribe now, and be sure to like this video. If you would like your story featured on the next video, email my email in the description box below. And until we meet again, I hope you enjoyed this good scare, and stay sinful.